Welcome, everyone. I love seeing so many people here and everyone online. It's a testament to the extraordinary talent sitting right next to me.
That's very nice. Thank you.
I have to say, I just downed this book. I loved it. I loved reading about it. I'm curious why this book now? Was there a moment where you thought, okay, now I'm ready to write this? This isn't your first book.
No, it's my third book.
Yes.
I wrote 2 books, 30 years ago. And actually it was inspired by the first book I wrote because I wrote about working in Moscow in the mid-1980s at the time of Glasnost and Perestroika, which was a fascinating time, especially working in the theater. And I was teaching at the Moscow Arts Theater School. I don't speak Russian, by the way, but I was teaching there. Apparently they understood me. It was a lot of sign language. Anyway, what happened was that I had to write, when I wrote the story of that journey, I wrote partly a little bit of biography, and then I thought one day I've got to do that, I've got to write. And the motivating force for the whole thing was my mom and dad. It really was about to honor their lives, which were not happy ones. They had been, but by the time I had the first 8 years of my life were blissful, but after that it was downhill. So that was why I wanted to write. I really wanted to honor them in that way. And then I was also, because of the show and various things, and I've done some writing in the past, articles and stuff. And then somebody at Quercus suggested, would you write a biography? And I just felt, it was difficult because I was still doing Succession while writing the biography. And and that's how it all came about.
You mentioned your childhood. Frank Rich, in his intro, calls your childhood Dickensian. And you just mentioned, your father died tragically when you were young. You were 8. Your mother struggled with mental health. How was it? I think we all live with our childhoods every day, but we don't all have that opportunity to really sit down and write about it.
Well, it was cathartic in many ways. It was also partly healing. There was certainly that aspect of it, and the fact that I could address these issues and also address them with a slight comic eye, not take it, it was quite serious, but not overly indulge in the seriousness of it. So in a way, it was a great journey. But also, ironically, the thing that came out of it was I got very angry. And I can be angry, but I was surprised that I was angry because I just realized there was nobody looking out for me.
Right.
So I suddenly saw Brian Cox, the 8-year-old, from 8 till the age of 15, as a figure out there. And I thought, well, why isn't anybody taking care of this kid, And it was just circumstance. It wasn't meant. All my sisters, I had 3 older sisters, much older than me. 17 and down to 12 years older than me. And they were, certainly the 2 oldest ones were with family. They had their own families. They were starting their lives, and it was difficult because my eldest sister lived in a very working class environment. I actually stayed in an apartment, which was 2 rooms, literally 2 rooms. Her 2 sons slept in one room, and she and her husband slept in the other, and that was also the kitchen. And they shared the toilet on a stair with 5 other families. So nobody can really understand what that's like. And of course, it would have been difficult for somebody else. I did actually go and spend some time, and my older sister has always been very good, but it was tough. It was tough, and there was no system to really make sure that. But I survived, and also, I think it's partly why I'm as independent as I am, really. Sometimes too independent.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if in recounting these stories and revisiting them, if you saw a direct through line of, okay, I see now why I sought out acting.
Yeah, there's definitely a through line, and it has it's a double thing. It's made me independent, but also too independent in many ways. That sometimes I have trust issues. I feel that I have to do it myself. If I don't do it, nobody else will do it for me. And it's a kind of there's a slight neurotic element about that, which I try to shake off, but it's there. You know?
Right. You mentioned in the book how you talked to your sister May, I believe, when you were writing. How did you get any stories about yourself that you didn't know when you were talking to people? Family?
Let me think. What did I not? No, I think I knew everything. No, it was nothing that had me.
I mean,
covered.
they weren't paying attention to you, so they probably didn't.
No, but they weren't. Well, I tell you what was surprising. Now, this was really surprising. I did have a conversation with my sister May, and she hadn't realized that my mother had a nervous breakdown. Now, everybody else knew about it, and maybe she's getting quite old now. She's 90, so she may have forgotten. I doubt it. But I think there was, you see, that's the other thing about working class people is we don't express ourselves in a way. We don't actually share stuff with one another. We're very reserved about who we are. And I think that reservation sometimes goes a bit too far. And certainly I think, my mother's greatest praise for anything was, if I did something, she said, oh, it was quite nice. And that was it, And I thought, oh my God, I've scored. Quite nice. Oh, thanks, Ma. Thanks. But that was it. That was the level that we're on all the time. So it was kind of odd. That kind of working class reserve.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to ask you about the title, "Putting the Rabbit in the Hat." There's a great story involving Albert Finney. Why don't you tell?
Well, it was we were. This was in 1970. Anyway, and what happened was that. We were doing Tamburlaine, which is a play by Christopher Marlowe, which is an exceedingly tedious play. I mean, exceedingly tedious. It's all kind of rhetoric and bullshit, it really is. And it's not Shakespeare, Anyway, we're doing the play, and we'd been rehearsing it for months. And there was a strike at the theatre, and the theatre, it was supposed to be the opening play for the new National Theatre in its new home in 1977. It was directed by Peter Hall. But the rehearsals went on and on and on, and eventually there was a strike, we had to break. Some of us went off and did other plays. I mean, there was one actor who they never called, who was waiting for his call to come in to rehearse. And he didn't know the whole thing had been postponed. And he came in, he was a pipe smoker, he came in and said, I just found out that I think there's something going on and they haven't told me. I said, that's all right, Nick, you're fine. It's just that we've reached a hiatus. So anyway, we finally come back, and Albert Finney is playing the eponymous role. And he's amazing, Albert. He's an amazing guy. And there's a friend of mine, Oliver Cotton, who's playing one of the kings. Tamburlaine is surrounded by three kings, a bit like the Three Musketeers. There's Theridamas, Uzum, Kasani, and Tekeles. Well, about that for a memory. Anyway, and they are these three kings. I played Theridamas, who was the sort of Aramis figure. Anyway, so we're all sitting around, and we're having a real problem with this endless rhetoric, because there's no back. It's just, So anyway, we're doing all this, and Albert says, come on, lads, come on, what's your problem? Come on, it's so simple. It's like getting the rabbit out of the hat. What you do is it's magic. You get the rabbit out of the hat. That's what you do. You get the rabbit out of the hat. My friend Oliver said, yeah, the problem, Albert, is how do we get the rabbit into the hat? And that says it all. So I just thought, there was a couple of titles that I played with. The one I liked, which I was dissuaded of, was a Lindsay Anderson quote, which is, don't just stand there. No, what is it? No, it was, don't just do something, stand there.
That's on my list of questions, because that's one of my favorite moments in the book. And
yeah, well, that was, and I thought that was a great title. But my English publishers didn't understand it. So they said, have you come up with another title? And then I came up with Putting the Rabbit in the Hat, which I also think is a good title.
Absolutely. To me, it says so much about that you need to do all this work as an actor and do the stuff that isn't super fancy,
No,
and
that's
then
right.
as the rabbit comes out, that's when the audience is going to ooh and ah. That's
You're
when,
absolutely
oh my
right.
goodness.
Yeah, Jessica, you're absolutely on the money. That's absolutely right, yeah.
And I'm curious if in that moment, if that changed your perspective at all, or even with Lindsay's advice.
Well, Lindsay certainly did. I mean, Peter Hall, yeah. Anyway, but Lindsay Anderson was something else. I mean, he was a very wise old owl. And he would do these things like, I remember we were doing this play called In Celebration. And I had to do something where I had to come in at the beginning of the play, and I'd not been, the idea of the play is it's three sons attending their parents' 40th wedding anniversary. And Alan Bates was one of the eldest, I was the youngest, and a wonderful actor called James Bolam was the middle son. So we come back, and I was the first one on stage. And the idea is I hadn't been in this house for a number of years. I'd also had a nervous breakdown, the character I was playing. So I was coming in, and I did it, and I went, and Lindsay went, oh, no. And I said, well, what is it? He said, well, you're too quick. You're not taking the house in, you're not looking at where all those wonderful photographs were, and where are the photographs that are not any longer there. So, and it was amazing, because he had this scenario that he gave me, and it was, and finally, we rehearsed. I remember it was in the whole play, it's only about 30 seconds, but we rehearsed a whole morning on it. And eventually, he did say, it went to 25 minutes that I was standing around, going around and doing all that. And we realized that could not be in the play in the evening. So Lindsay finally said, oh, Brian, don't just do something, stand there.
It's kind of extraordinary in the moment when you tell that story, because here you were already an established actor at that point, and to get a piece of advice from a director, I think that just clicks something in your mind is special.
You see, that's the actor's desire. The actor's desire is to get the great note. It's the great note that motivates you as an actor. When somebody comes up with something and you haven't thought about it, it's like, oh my God, it's like the sun comes out, And unfortunately, it's a dying art. You're not getting a great note at all. In fact, you're getting really notes that are of no worth whatsoever, really. Most of the time. I mean, there are the odd interesting and talented directors, but a lot of them are just pests, really.
I wanted to go back to your childhood a little bit and with another Albert Finney moment, because you write about seeing Saturday Night and Sunday Morning, and you said, it's a quote from your book, it radically changed me on a cellular level, seeing him in this movie.
Yeah, it was phenomenal. I mean, I'd gone to we call in my home country, we call it the pictures. We don't call it the movies or the cinema, we call it the pictures. So you used to go to the pictures. So I went to the pictures from the age of 5, and in my hometown in the early 50s, there were 21 cinemas. And we only had a population of 150,000, but we had 21 cinemas. And in the street parallel, at right angles to where I live, was called Arthurstone Terrace. And there was 2 cinemas. There was the Broadway on one side, and kitty corner to that was the Royal. So I could see as many, and it was double features, so I could see as many as 8 movies in a week. And believe me, I saw 8 movies in a week, because I was fanatical. But all the films I watched and loved were American. That was my, I couldn't connect with Doctor in the House or Doctor at Sea, all those, or Dirk Bogarde, who's a marvelous actor, but I couldn't connect with them. But I could connect with the American, Cagney, Humphrey Bogart, and finally Marlon Brando, James Dean, and the comedies. I was a huge Martin and Lewis fan. Martin and Lewis, not Jerry Lewis, Martin and Lewis, because I think Martin is one of the great unsung straight men of all times. And then the other one was Danny Kaye. I absolutely adored Danny Kaye. So it was always American. That's all I thought. And then I wanted to become an actor. And I thought, well, Brian, there's no way you can become an actor. A, because you're not American.
Right.
And that's the sort of what you want to do. And, there's no way that you're going to be a Dirk Bogarde or a Kenneth More. It's not going to work. So I kind of it was a bit depressing. And then I went to the Plaza Cinema in the hill town of Dundee. and I saw Albert Finney in Saturday night and Sunday morning. And I could not believe it, because there was a guy on the screen playing a working class character from the South, from Nottingham, but he looked like me, you know, and I just thought, God, this is amazing. It's possible. So it was shifting something at a very cellular level that suddenly I realized, oh, I can be an actor. And, you know, the rest, you know, I was able to get a job, an interview in the local repertory theatre through a couple of teachers, not teachers who taught me personally, but who looked after me, looked out for me. And I got into Dundee Rep, and that's how I started.
What was the moment where you thought, okay, I'm good at this?
When? What was the moment?
Yeah.
Well, you know, I think I've always thought I'm not bad. I mean, that's Scottish praise, by the way.
You are your mother's son.
I am my mother's son. I'm no bad. He's no bad. Quite nice, no bad. So I've always thought I'm no bad. As I've got older, I've realized I'm actually fucking good at this. You know, I know what I'm fucking talking about. I can fucking do it. It's fucking great, wonderful. And it's a whole different thing. But it's come to me later on. And it's the nice thing about getting older, because you just don't give a, you know what, in the same way. You know, you're not clouded by anything. Things are, and you know, it's for better or for worse. You are what you are, because you can't, you know, and so much of the time. And it's such a pressure on young actors. They have to constantly shapeshift. You know, what is it? Shapeshift. You know, they're all not shapeshift. You know, they've got to shapeshift in some way or another to keep ahead of the game or up with the game, and it's tough. And it gets tougher, I mean, because there's less standards around, there's less structure around, there's less ways for these young actors to really exercise the development of their craft in the same way. It just doesn't happen. It happens a little bit more on the other side of the Atlantic than it happens on this side of the Atlantic. So, you know, that's why I've come to the conclusion that, you know, I think I know what I'm doing now, you know.
Yeah. Another interesting detail about acting that I thought was fascinating, when you talk about how an actor should not want to strive to become the character. You just have to be the character.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was wondering if there have been characters for you that have been, it's just been more seamless. You could just be that character, and others you really had to strive with the becoming part.
There has been parts which have fitted me. I mean, this is where Lindsay was great about giving me the break that I got right at the early start. I mean, I had done a West End play at the age of 21, and it was good and all that, but it was kind of pyrotechnical, because I was quite good at that. I was quite good at being, you know, smart. And but I needed to root myself, and I needed to find something which was closer to the inner self, in a way, to portray as someone who was troubled. And ironically, it was the play in Celebration, the play that I've just talked about rehearsing, that Lindsay really gave me that. I mean, I auditioned at the Royal Court 5 times before I got a job there. And the final audition was with Lindsay Anderson. And he gave me that role, and it was a wonderful role, because it was all internal. And it allowed me to be on the stage. I mean, I learned how to be, just sitting on a chair. And it was great. It was wonderful, and that was a gift, you know.
You did so many roles and productions, and one you write about being in King Lear with Laurence Olivier.
Yeah.
And I just feel like I need to tell us a story about it, because you're the only one here who was in King Lear with Olivier.
Well,
any story.
Well, Olivier was astonishing. I actually consider myself incredibly blessed, because I worked with Olivier, I worked with Ralph Richardson, and I also worked with John Gielgud. And they were probably the ruling triumvirate of the British theatre for certainly, really, you know, the whole of the first half of the 20th century. And they were amazing men. They were extraordinary men. Ralph was one of the funniest men ever, and had a wicked sense of humor. John had this most incredible memory that he could recall where he was on a night. He had a total recall about VE night in London. Amazing stuff. And Larry was extraordinary because he came.
Sorry, I'm just going to stop for a second. Larry?
Oh, sorry, Sir Laurence Olivier. Larry, he was extraordinary because he was an actor. He wasn't, but when you met him, I remember going for an audition for him, and he was like a bank manager. He wore glasses and he conventional suit, and he wasn't like the roles that one had seen on stage and in film, like Richard III or Hamlet or any of those amazing performances that he gave. He was just very mundane. But I think as he got older and he became more sly old fox, actually. And we were doing this, we were doing Lear, and there was an actor called Edward Petherbridge and I were playing the Burgundy in France. And it was just one scene right at the beginning of the play. And he was quite old then, and also had been quite ill. He'd had prostate cancer, and he'd just recovered. And actually, it was within 2 years he'd be gone. But he would not. In the morning, we had another actor to rehearse for him, who stood in for him, and we rehearsed with this other actor. And then in the afternoon, we would record, and he would come in, and it was 5 cameras, and we would do the whole business. So it was the first scene of the play, and Larry was he was pretty tired, pretty exhausted, and he came in, and there'd been a production of Lear on the television the previous weekend, directed by Jonathan Miller, with Michael Hordern playing Lear, which was quite a good production. So we came in, and we were sitting as we do, waiting for the lights and the adjustments to happen. So we were sitting in a corner with these chairs, and he suddenly goes, did anybody see King Lear on the television last week? Yeah? No? And and then somebody would come and say, Sir Laurence, we need to check your mic. Can you, sure, okay, bye me. All right, thank you. Yeah. Did anybody see Michael Hordern on the television? And then somebody would come in again, and he would be whisked off, and he would come back, and he would sit there, and he'd go, we have got a wonderful cast. I love this cast. Johnny Hurt, what a wonderful actor. Colin Blakely, Leo McKern, and those great women, Diana Rigg and Anna. They're wonderful. It's great. It's great. It's great. It's such a great cast. He said, I don't know my lines. And we went, no, I don't know a fucking word of this part. Not a fucking word. I don't know why I'm here. And I don't know why they're putting up with me. Because I really don't know a fucking word of this part. I said, no, Sir Laurence, that's not true. You do. You're doing a you're so sweet, you're so kind, it's so great. Did anybody see Michael Hordern last week on the television? He knew his lines. He knew all of his lines. And then he did this, on God's honor, he did this. But I'm still a better fucking actor than he is any day. And we went, fucking hell, really. It was amazing. This energy came out of this 81-year-old man, and it was just staggering, And he would do little things, like he would try and knock you off guard. He was amazing, truly amazing.
It's funny because when you tell, it's one of a million just extraordinary stories in your memoir, and when you tell that story, I think you write something about how it just shows how all actors are always, you want to be the best.
You want to be the best.
Yeah.
And Larry was, he couldn't bear it. And even though when he was younger, he was like a bank manager, and he wouldn't give anything, he wouldn't give to the fact that he was an actor, but he was an astonishing man. And he set a standard, an amazing standard. It's lucky to be alive in the 60s and witness all that amazing work with Maggie Smith and Edith Evans and Noel Coward and Robert Stevens. It was just amazing time.
Did you have a sense of, I'm working with, doing these once in a lifetime productions?
You knew it. That's the extraordinary thing and it's what I hate nowadays, is there's no frickin' sense of history. There's no sense of where we come from and where we're going to. Thank you. And I think it's such a lack, that, and that's one of the other reasons of writing the book, was to acknowledge the past and say, without that, we can't be here. Yeah. And this cancel culture just tries to negate all kind of history, It's what you do, it's what you did 30 years ago, that's what we judge you on. And you go, this is nonsense. People should grow up,
Yeah.
Anyway, that's my lecture over.
I'm curious, when you thought about, I can have a very successful career on stage, staying in the UK, or I can go to Hollywood.
Yeah.
And what was your approach to that? Were you nervous? Were you excited?
Well, I first came to LA in 1976, and I was 30, and I had this extraordinary thing which I talk about in the book, where I thought I was going up for this great movie, and it turned out I wasn't. But what it was I was summoned to meet John Schlesinger, and he was actually editing The Marathon Man. And I didn't know anything about that. I didn't know what was going on. And I sort of arrived at his office, and the lady, his secretary, said, "No, you've got to go to the editing suite." And I went, "Oh, okay." So I went to the editing suite, and I sat there, and there was a guy there called Jim Clark, who was normally John's editor, but he was coming in to do, I didn't know, but it was to do a rescue job on The Marathon Man, because they were having a few problems with it. So I was sitting there, and and he says, "Hi," and I said, "Hi." I said, "Well, I'm here to meet John." He said, "Oh, what about?" I said, "I don't know. It's just it's a meeting, it's being arranged." And I said, "Oh, okay." And then this head popped round, this sort of hugely sunburnt man with big glasses popped round, and it was Robert Evans, and he was the producer. And he said, "Who are you?" And I said, "Oh, I'm Brian Cox. I'm here to meet John." "Why?" I said, "Well, I don't know." Oh, reshoots. Yeah, the reshoot. And I went, "Reshoots? Oh, interesting. Reshoots. I wonder what that could be. Is it me? They want me to do some reshoots? Do they want me to play Dustin Hoffman's brother?" So, and the fantasy world goes, yeah, so I'm sort of sitting there with all this going on, and the guy was saying, "Oh, yeah, they're doing research," and I'm going, "Oh, okay." And then finally John arrives, and he says, "Come on, we've got to go, and we'll eat on the way." And he takes me and sort of takes me to his office, and we sit down. He said, "Right." He said, "No, so I get good things about you. I hear good things about you." I said, "Oh, thank you." He said, "Yeah, no, I hear good things." He said, "So I'm going to be doing a production of Julius Caesar at the National Theatre in London, and they're thinking of you as Brutus." Now, normally I would think, "Oh, that's great," but I'm thinking, what about the reshoots?
Like, we're in Los Angeles.
We're in Los Angeles. Paramount. And of course it wasn't to be, so I ended up doing, what was your original question?
I don't even remember, but I loved it. It was...
So that was that, so...
going to Hollywood.
Oh, well, going to Hollywood. So when I was in there at that time, I just thought, I can't handle this. Yeah. I realized I couldn't, because there was something about it which was, in the best sense of the word, fake. In the worst sense of the word, fake. And I just thought, I don't know. It's my mother would say when something was not on, she would say, it's no real. And I felt that there was something no real about Hollywood at that time. And also, I think you had to have a certain sensibility to deal with it, you know. And I was too young, too ambitious, too vulnerable in career getting, as it were. So I thought, no. And it took me a long time to realize. So I kind of went back and had a great time. I did a lot of great television because we used to do, well, we still do now. There was a gap when I left the country to come here. But we did I was doing great television, lots of classical series, and then finally going into the theater and finally going to the National Theater and to do Julius Caesar, as it turned out, which was truly terrible. But anyway, we'll let that pass. Anyway, what happened was I realized that I developed a really quite a great theater career, but I knew there was something missing. And I knew I hadn't made my date with what I wanted to do, which was to do movies. And we don't have a movie industry as such in the UK. We make movies, but there's not the same kind of thing as there is here, or the same kind of lineage of film. So I just thought, no, I'm going to stay. And then I got to a point where I thought, I did Lear, I played all the great roles, and I was thinking, I've got to move on. I've got to go to LA. I've got to just go. And I came here in 96, not here, there, over there. I came in 96. I stayed for a few months. I met a bunch of people. And then I went back to the UK, and I was actually co-producing a series of acting masterclasses with various actors for television. And I got a call one Thursday afternoon, ironically, to say, Dustin Hoffman's a no-show. And I thought, what does that mean? So he's a no-show. We're doing this film, Long Kiss Goodnight, and he was going to be playing this cameo role, but he's decided not to do it. He said, and we start filming on Monday. So can you get on a plane and come? And I went, okay. So I was on the phone. I said, okay, I've got to do that. So I did it. Got by, but I was also still making these programs. So I came back, did 10 days in Toronto, had a great time.
I love that movie, by the way.
It's a really good script, Shane Black. And it was great. And Gina Davis, we had a great time. Rennie Harlan, who was the director. It was all really delightful. Then I came back and I got on with the second masterclass, and I was in exactly the same spot at Heathrow, and the telephone went again. And it was saying, doing a movie in Chicago called Chain Reaction, and Tommy Lee Jones has just walked off the set. He doesn't want to play the role, and they'd like you to fly out and take over. Okay. So I got on the plane and I flew out and I took over. But what they didn't tell me was when I arrived, I asked for a script and they said they didn't have one. I said, well, that was the Tommy Lee Jones script, but we're not doing that anymore.
So you've really benefited from temperamental acting.
I did.
Yes.
I was very lucky. But so that's when I realized that I was moving towards being, doing character work. And that was great because you don't have that horrible onus of the opening weekend, which all these leading actors have. If you don't make it in the opening weekend, you're dead in the water. Mm-hmm. And I think that's unfair, and sort of abusive of talent, really.
You famously, and you write about this in the book, turned down Game of Thrones and Pirates of the Caribbean, the former because it was a one season, essentially it was Robert Baratheon, and the latter because Johnny Depp. And
No, nothing to do with Johnny Depp. No, don't start with that, please. There's absolutely nothing to do. Johnny Depp's awfully nice, and he's not untalented, please. Anyway, no, what were you saying?
Well, no, I was just going to add, that was the beginning. I was going to ask you, was there...
The reason I turned it down is because the governor was a boring bloody part. And I didn't want to play it. And I just thought, there's nothing, I couldn't get my teeth into it at all. So my pal, Jonathan Pryce, played it and has been making a fortune out of it ever since. Stupid me.
I was curious, since you talk about roles that you didn't take, was there any role that you were just dying to get that you didn't?
Well, way back, really at the very beginning, I was up to play Beethoven. And it's a part I really wanted to play, and I didn't get it.
In which film?
It was a TV play that they did, a Sunday night TV play, way back. This was in 1971. Mm-hmm. And it was a great script, and there was me and another actor, and we were both up for it. He got it, and I was pissed. But it was a great role, you know. Beethoven, yeah. What
did you do with your first big old Hollywood paycheck? What did you buy yourself?
That's a good question. I didn't buy myself anything. I never do. I kind of get nervous about money. I'm nervous around money. I never think I've got enough, and then I've got too much, and then I need more, and so I get like that. And I'm never sure about buying myself anything. I mean, people buy me things. I mean, no, that's not true. That's a lie. Brian, don't tell bollocks. I mean, really, honestly, be truthful. No, I spend whenever I can.
Good for you.
No, well, I'm sorry. If anybody reads the book, the book is absolutely like that. I keep contradicting myself all the way through.
It's wonderful because you're such a good writer, and it's very colloquial, and you'll just say, you and I are going to talk about that a little later.
Yeah, I do that.
But and it feels, reading the book feels like you're just sitting down, and it's so much fun. I wanted to ask you about playing Hannibal Lecter,
right,
in Manhunter, which is one of my favorite of your performances, directed by Michael Mann. I actually just recently rewatched it. What was that like? That was, I think a lot of people became familiar with
That was, it was interesting. I was actually appearing here at the Public, doing a play called Rat in the Skull, and it was a great play about Northern Ireland, and I played this Northern Irish policeman, Protestant policeman, who has to interrogate this young Tague, this young Catholic boy. Great play, really powerful play, and I got an Olivier Award for it in London. And then we came here and did it. And there was this buzz about this film going around called Red Dragon, as it was called at that point. And they changed it to Manhunter, and then now the second version they called it Red Dragon. But it was both based on this book. So it was a lot of chat. And an actor who was going to play the part I was playing on stage in Chicago after we'd finished, actor Brian Dennehy, who became a great friend. And Brian had been he'd been up for this role as Hannibal Lecter. Not been up for it, but him and Michael Mann had worked together, and Michael had suggested perhaps he should play it. And Brian demurred. He said, "I'm far too big," because he was, he's a big guy, Brian. He said, "I think it should be someone who's more, not as like me." And he said, "I think you should think about this guy Cox." And there was a lot of people involved. There was John Lithgow involved, Mandy Patinkin was involved, Kevin Kline was involved. Kevin Kline actually turned down the part of Will Graham because he said, "That stuff scares me chicken shit." I go, "Oh, no, I can't be doing with it." So he turned that down. So what happened was that I said, "I'm open." And then the next thing you knew, I was... there was a casting director who was going to come and see the play. And she was called Bonnie Timmerman, great woman, wonderful woman. And I was to audition for the role. So my friend Phil Jackson, who was playing with me, decided he would read the lines with me, which was great. So I went off to the audition. And when I started, Bonnie said, "I don't want to see you." I said, "What?" She said, "I don't want to see you. I don't want to see you at all." I said, "Oh, well, okay." So I started the whole thing by doing that. I played the whole thing like that, and he was there. And actually it's in the film that in my back, unlike Tony Hopkins who's standing there like this, I'm like that. And I thought, okay, so I did that. And then afterwards I said, "Why didn't you want to see me?" She said, "Well, I came to the theater and I got there quite late, so I couldn't get to my seat. and they put me in a seat behind a pillar so I couldn't see you. All I could do was hear you, and it was your voice that really made me think that you were right for the role. So I wanted to try and recreate that feeling. And I got the role, so that was it.
Wow, that's especially, and his voice in it is so specific.
Yeah,
you know.
yeah,
So
yeah. So no, she was great, and she's wonderful, Bonnie. She's become a great
one of the
friend.
great casting people.
Oh, absolutely.
You have nice things to say about Michael Mann in the book, and I was wondering if there are any directors that you are you really wanting to be directed by.
I mean, I think Del Toro, I would think. Guillermo, I think
Del Toro,
he's somebody who really, I think, does really interesting work. And he's a director, I think. I nearly was in, actually, he wanted me to be in the Hobbit, but then he bowed out, and as a result, I bowed out as well, and Peter Jackson did it with somebody else who was terrible. Anyway. No, he wasn't terrible, he just wasn't very good. No, that's Brian, shut up, behave. Sorry. I'm a Gemini, so I occasionally talk to myself.
And what about actors? Are there people that you think, because you've worked with so many of the greats, and I was wondering if there's someone you thought, God, I really want to do a scene.
Oh, I'd love to work with Meryl Streep. You know, I mean...
How have you never worked with her? I feel like there's...
No, we've never worked together. I love to do something. I mean, there's some of these great actresses around. I mean, the other actress I really admire is Jean Smart, you know, who I think is a tremendous actress. You know, so there's certainly, you know, those women. There's a lot of women I would like to work with in that way. And you know, I've been lucky working with people like Morgan Freeman, who is a delight and a great guy to work with. I mean, I'd love to have worked with Hackman, but alas, he's retired. And Pacino and those three, De Niro, Pacino, and Hoffman.
You're a lot of headlines made over things you say, and I won't spoil any of them because everyone should read them. From everyone, Steven Seagal to Edward Norton, and all sorts of things, good and bad. How quickly did the angry calls come in?
Reasonably quickly.
Okay.
I haven't had anything from any. I mean, it's usually the Johnny Depp fan club went shit-faced about it, really. Which was odd, but I've discovered that apparently there's a Johnny Depp Protection Society. And they operate in a way. I didn't know about this. I was completely unaware of this because I thought it was all these individuals that were, you know, saying, how dare you disrespect. And I don't in fact, I've written an addendum, which is, no, I have. And I did, and it was supposed to be in the American version, but but we couldn't get it in time. Yeah. And because of publishing and all that nonsense. Anyway, so I've written this addendum, and what I talk about, because if you read the book, it's a conversation. So I say something, and then I'll go on to something else. Now, I can be a bit quick and a bit sharp and go for an easy laugh. So there's elements of that in the book where I'm being a bit sort of, you know, just to get the giggle. And sometimes I should have thought, Brian, maybe you should have thought that through a little bit better than you have done. And what I've said is, and I've discovered that and that was the clue. When they said I don't disrespect anybody who takes this profession on, because it's a monstrously difficult profession, and particularly for women, how hard it is for women. And I certainly I would not disrespect actor or an actress, you know, in any way.
Yeah, and even I think I have to be honest, it's very refreshing to read someone just say, this is how I feel. I mean, there's even in your discussion of Sir Ian McKellen, you're like, you talk about, we have different approaches.
Yeah, that's right.
That's not my kind of approach,
but... It is horses for courses, it really is. And you know, and that's always the tough thing in the UK is the tradition. The element of tradition, which is continuum in a way. And it's a good sign, but it's also something that you've got to be very careful about, you know.
Yeah. Absolutely. I want to go to, let's start with some questions. I mean,
can you read that?
I have some more. Yes, I can. I didn't bring my glasses out, but we'll say. What advice would you give to a young Brian Cox I mean, I just want to wear them.
No, they will certainly.
They are good.
Yeah, they are good.
What advice would you give to your younger self?
Just be yourself. Don't waver. Just, you don't have to blast it every single day, but just keep the faith. Always keep the faith. Even a small faith, but just keep it.
When you were sitting down and writing, did your editor come to you and say, "Ooh, don't write about that"?
No, not at all. My Quercus was absolutely brilliant. Both Suzanne, who's here tonight, wonderful. They've been fantastic, and my English editors as well. So I couldn't hope for better editorship and a better, the way they presented, the way they've dealt with the book. I'm just over the moon with how they've been. I really am.
I've waited long enough to ask you about Logan Roy.
Yeah. Oh.
Succession.
Yeah.
Tell me about your very first meeting. Tell me about the first time you saw a script or sat down with Jesse or...
It was a phone call. I was in London. Jesse was in Italy, and Adam McKay was in LA. So we were, spread apart. And I mean, as soon as they talked about the show, I just knew that it was hot. I knew that this was going to be something else. And it had been said to me, and I'm not even sure if it was true, but it was my manager told me it was only going to be a one-season part, that he'd probably die at the end of the first season. And luckily enough, he hasn't. He still might, though. But so what happened was that, we talked, and then I talked. I mean, one of the things I said, which was really strange, because I did say, he could be Scots. He could be a Scots fella. And Jesse was very against that. He said, oh, no, he's got to be American. He has to be American. Adam McKay, on the other hand, was quite keen on, as an American Scot, was quite keen on the American Scot idea. So we sort of hummed and hawed with that a bit. And, I said, I play more Americans than I played English people. I said, that's fine. And then I said, so what is this notion that maybe it's just a one-season part? And so there was this huge pause on the Pacific and on the Adriatic. Huge pause. And then finally, both in harmony said, oh, no, it's more than one season.
You're right.
And it was,
I thought it was so fascinating. You had one question about Logan for Jesse. Yeah. Tell us what
the thing about Logan, because he's so contentious and everybody has their view of Logan, and there are people who like Logan, who really do. Kelly Ripa and Ryan Seacrest refer to me as their leader.
Did you back away slowly?
No, I just said, I just took it for all it's worth. I said, you're absolutely right. And no, I didn't. But no, what was interesting was that the thing I wanted to know, and I asked Jesse, I said, because he's so cruel some of the times, most of the times. And so I said, does he love his children? And Jesse said he absolutely loves his children. And of course, that is his Achilles heel.
Yeah.
Is he can't express that love. He finds it difficult to express love anyway because of about his conditioning, about the stuff that we don't know about him, that's all hinted at and what have you. And that's the great thing about Logan, is he's a real mystery. And that's what I love about him, because is he? I mean, and there are things one does where I get the audience going in a way that they think I'm thinking this when I'm actually thinking something else. And the best example of that is there's a scene in, and I can talk about that because, I mean, if you haven't streamed it, too fucking bad. Anyway. But there's a scene in episode 7 where there's a kind of, again, one of my conflicts with my eldest, Kendall, and I go to visit him at his house, and we're sitting down to dinner, and we're talking about, I want him to come back into the fold, And I express it in a typical, Logan way, which isn't particularly loving, because he doesn't know how to express himself in that way. But there's a point where the meal comes in, and they put a plate down for me, and then they put a plate down for him. And the plate they put for him, he said, no, that's for my father. So then they put the plate over here. Now, I have the plate, and I know that he wants me to think that this is poisoned. But I know it's not poisoned, because he wouldn't do that. So I decide to take him on a little journey. And the little journey is, where are the kids? Where's my grandson? And he said, oh, they're here. I said, well, come in. I haven't seen them. And they come in. I said, hey, how are you? Great to see you. Great. I said, do you like pasta? And he says, not really. I said, well, I think this is probably rather good pasta. Would you like to try it for me? Try it, will you? And he does. And, of course, Kendall takes it that I am so ruthless, I would poison my grandson. Mm-hmm. And, of course, that's the last frickin' thing he would do is poison his grandson. But what he will do is don't play fucking games with me because I'm better than you are.
Yes.
But it's interesting because sometimes even the audience don't get it. They think, oh, he thinks he's going to be poisoned. Well, of course he's not going to poison me.
Right.
But because he does this stupid thing with the plate, saying, take that one, none of that one, he's trying to he's suddenly doing a thing in the moment, and you go, oh, come on.
Have there been any other questions that you wanted to ask Jesse about this character, or do you feel like
No,
you have
that was the only
ownership?
one. I needed that. It's the one thing I needed to be secure on, mm-hmm. that how deep his love of his kids are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is there anything you do to either at the beginning of a season, or I know you're not method, and you talk about that in the book, but is there anything that you do to kind of prepare yourself to be Logan, like to music or whatever it is?
No, not really. I mean, it's the power of the imagination. The story I tell, and it's a true story, is, a lot of the training of American actors is based on, Strasberg has certainly had a huge effect, and a lot of it is great, don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm not totally against it. I just think it gets out of hand, but I'm not totally against it. And one of the things that happened, happened in the 30s, was there was the group theater, and Charles Crawford, Bobby, what's his name? Gone. Bobby Lewis, and Strasberg. They were the central three, and there was people like Odets and Elia Kazan and Stella Adler, the great Stella Adler. And Stella was always a little bit, like this about the training, but she was open. So she took herself off to Paris and she knew that Stanislavski was going to be in Paris. Now, one of the great things is this thing about emotional memory. And it was one of the original precepts of Stanislavski. I think it's in Building a Character. The fact that you tune into the emotional memory. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but it shouldn't be a substitute. And interestingly enough, she goes to see him, and finally she gets to see the maestro Stanislavski, and she says, so can you tell me about emotional memory? And he says, oh, I got rid of that years ago. And she said, what? He said, oh, no, I got rid of that years ago. And she said, why? She said, because it interferes with the imagination. It interferes with what you can imagine. It's fine to tune in, fair enough, to a circumstance that you can relate to or find a bridge to. He said, but not at the expense of the imagination, not at the expense of the freer form of how you create something. And I think that was incredible. So when Stella goes back to New York, and there's a meeting of the group, and they're all there, and they're all excited to find out what it was, and of course she's she's champing at the bit to tell them. And she says, well, yeah, I saw the maestro, and you know what he says about you-know-what. And he said, what? You know what? The emotional memory. He says it just gets in the way. You don't need it. You really don't need it. And it's helpful, but you don't need to depend on it. And Strasberg says, well then, Stanislavski is wrong. And that's how that grew where it's grown,
Yeah. I think, well, how many times a day would you say people come up to you on the street and say, will you say fuck off to me?
Regularly. I mean, it's embarrassing. I mean, the most embarrassing incident of that was when I was in, it was the time of the Golden Globes, and my pal Rosanna Arquette invited me to a Me Too meeting, and it was Ronan Farrow's book, and he was doing readings from the book, and there were all these Hollywood ladies there, and it was right in Pacific Palisades, in an amazing house that she has. And I arrived late, so I was sitting at the back listening to Ronan, and it was fascinating stuff, really interesting what he was doing, and the women were very intense, about the whole Me Too, and at the end they all applauded and everything, and that was great, and I was going, wow, that's really interesting. And then finally, they all turned around, and I was back, so they saw me, and they looked, and they went, and they took their devices out, and they came up to me and said, can you tell us to fuck off? At a Me Too meeting, asking a white dinosaur to tell him to fuck off. I mean, really, and you go, oh, Jesus, what a crazy world,
How did you perfect the fuck off, or did it just happen in that moment?
Well, I'm a Celt. We swear better than anybody. We can do, the Irish are great. The Irish, I won't go on about the swear words, but the Irish with the C word are experts. They're poets. They're poets of the C word, the Irish. They really are. The Scots, they know how to fuck off.
Another one of my favorite Loganisms that I think just doesn't get the attention it should is the
Yeah.
And I was wondering what that, I don't know, was that something that you came up with? Was it in the script?
There was a couple of ahas in the script, and they grew. So I would, when in doubt, sometimes it's about, I'm not sure what the next line is. And it gives you a chance to think about the next line.
Who do you love sparring with the most on set, when you think like, oh, I'm going to really dig my teeth into this scene?
Sarah, from playing, definitely. And now Kieran, actually. Mm-hmm. Sarah and Kieran, I love. And my pal is Alan Ruck, my misbegotten Connor, who's a delight, absolute delight. And I was particularly pleased that he finally got that I'm the eldest son scene, which I thought was really good on.
Yes, absolutely. All right, I'm going to borrow your glasses again.
I do.
What is your favorite line from Shakespeare? Oh, good question.
All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts. I won't go on, but because I can't remember the rest of it.
What was it like working with Wes Anderson?
Great. Mad as a hatter, but great.
Yeah.
Obsessive. Wonderful. He's a real, wow, what an original talent. Just incredible. He was amazing. I had to have words with him, though, about when we worked together with Jason, wonderful Jason Schwartzman. We did that scene at the beginning of the film, which is a great scene about his grades and what have you. And Wes was over-directing him, and Jason was ill. He had Hodgkin's. He was really ill. He was fine. He came out of it okay. And he was young. He was 16. So, but Wes would say, Jason, say it again. And he would do a line and then say it again. And I eventually said, Wes, we're not getting any rhythm to this scene if after every line that Jason says you ask him to say it again, because we're not going to create the rhythm of the scene. And he said, oh, sorry. So we started again and just went, say it again.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, how do directors take that when you give them feedback?
They're usually quite good about it.
Yeah.
I try not to give them too much feedback because I don't want to give them more credit than they deserve. So I try not to give too much feedback, and certainly don't expose your ideas to them because they'll tell everybody. No, I mean, it's a joke about directors. I mean, I've worked with some great directors, and I've had some great time. I mean, Spike Lee. I mean, you can't work with anybody better than Spike Lee. I mean, he's just the best to me.
Any chance you'll direct some Succession?
Yeah. No, not Succession. But I'm going to do a film, hopefully, after this season of Succession. I want to do, a friend and I have been we're both getting on, and we're both Scots, and we want to do a love letter to our country. So he's written a very good script called Glenrothen, which is about a distillery. And it's about two brothers and a distiller played by, who's a female. And it's about their relationship. And one of the brothers, one of the brothers left. He was the distiller. He was the talented member of the family, but he left. He went to America and became a writer he was a journalist, but his specialty was jazz music in Chicago. And they haven't seen each other for 40 years, and it's about them coming together again. It's a lovely story.
Do you think you'll be in it as well?
I am. I'm going to play the elder brother as well as, which is not the biggest part. It's a great part, but it's really about Donal, who is the one who's cut himself off and is kind of lost.
Have you cast your younger brother and the distiller?
My younger brother, I know who I want. It's a question of whether I get him or not. But I can't say who he is because that would be bad luck.
Okay. Is there a role that you have not yet played that you would love to?
No. Not really. I mean, I treat it as it comes. When you're younger, you want to play, when I was a kid, I would have loved to have played Hamlet, and there's no chance of that now, though Ian McKellen played Hamlet very, very old recently, which must have been quite interesting.
Best fish and chips in Dundee.
Best fish and chips. Well, of course, I don't know what it was like now, but the Soaves was very good. They're all Italians. Soaves were good. Del Nevo's were very good. The Esposito family did some great cod. And Carinos, the Carinos, they were the ones that used to say sometimes we got quite desperate, my mother and I, because she ran out. Once she came out of hospital, she couldn't work, so she was depending on a widow's pension, and she wouldn't get a widow's pension till Friday, and sometimes of a Thursday night we didn't have anything to eat. Maybe 3 times. So I would go across to the local fish and chip shop. And he would always lecture me. He said, listen, you want the fish and the chips, eat the fish and the chips. You don't want the fish and the chips, don't muck with the sat dish or anything like that, okay? I said, fine, Mario, that's good. He said, yeah. He said, what can I do? I said, well, is there any chance we can get some batter bits? Sure, I've got lots of batter bits. So these were the bits of batter that were at the end of the pan, and that would be our Thursday night dinner.
Wow. What role taught you the most about yourself?
I think, there's been several roles that the way you don't realize something that's in a role and then it comes to you. Like I did The Master Builder. And one of the key things in The Master Builder, and I hadn't realized it, is that the wife has lost children. And with my first wife, we had stillborn children. And I didn't realize there was a sort of resonance there when I got to it. And I think playing Stephen, one of my earliest roles with Lindsay Anderson, taught me a lot about how I needed to really be able to contain my energy more, let people come to me rather than them go to them.
A question of, are you impacted differently being reviewed as a writer versus being reviewed as an actor?
I shall take it either way. No, I'm very happy to be reviewed as a writer. I mean, I've always, for someone who's basically I was regarded as educationally subnormal. I left school at 15. My education was no, it's true. I was regarded as education. I didn't have any formal education, really. Right. So the fact that I can write is...
You were at the movies.
Pardon?
Because you were at the movies.
Apart from the movies, but that was all, that was all performance. It was stuff that was done. But I didn't... And I kind of always thought I could write. And I was a bit nervous about it because I always thought I'm not worthy to write. But now I've really got the taste for it.
What's your favorite movie of all time?
That's hard. My very favorite comedy of all times, and I tend to like comedies as I get older. Well, I suppose when I was younger, I would say On the Waterfront or East of Eden and stuff like that. But I think my favorite movie is Danny Kaye and The Court Jester. I love The Court Jester. I think it's one of the funniest films ever. And it's very interesting. The other film I like, too, equally to that, is Bringing Up Baby.
Yeah. No. Wonderful. LIE is a wonderful film. It is. You write about it in the book. Russell wanted to know your experience on that.
It was just a great film to work on. It was Michael Cuesta who put the whole thing together, and he had his brother and a guy who also wrote a lot of the dialogue, and it was just a really interesting script, and it was a script that people didn't want me to do. A lot of said it's dodgy because you're playing this chicken hawk and maybe not be good for your reputation. I said, I don't give a shit. I'm an actor, that's what I do. And it turned out to be a great role and a great movie. Yeah,
one of many. Last question. Do you know how Succession ends? Do you want to know how Succession ends?
No, absolutely not. I don't want to know how Succession ends. It will end. It's going to come to an end. I don't know when. It was very funny. I was looking at Billions, which is done its 6th season, and I was thinking we won't go that far. We won't go that far. We'll. I think maybe 5. It could be this last season, maybe 5. It just depends. It depends how the writers are. If they want to move on to different. Because it's the whole work. That's what they do. I mean, actors, we can go off and do other stuff, but that's what they start now, and they're with it until we finish filming it.
Well, Logan is one of many extraordinary roles. It's the one we get to live with now, so I think so many of us are thinking about it. But the book, Putting the Rabbit in the Hat, is incredible. It's so beautifully written, and the stories are wonderful, and I hope you all read it immediately. Brian Cox, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much. Thank you.